Hey, this is Janiva Magness, and coming to you from a wonderful podcast called Talking Blues with my friend Mako.
So we talked about names, and Janiva is a name that I'm not familiar with. You're the only Janiva I know. Tell me about the origins of that name or what you know about that name.
Um, it's an odd little story. I'll try to be brief for purposes of time. It's difficult for me to be
Okay.
brief. I think the devil's in the details. Uh, uh, it is a name that has been on my mother's side of the family for many generations. It is more of a bastardized version, I suppose, at least I imagine it that way, of Geneviève. My mother was half French, half Irish, but the French lineage was quite dominant for her, for us, consequently. And so I do know a couple other Genevas,
Yeah.
yeah, which is funny. A woman that I met many, many, many years ago. I mean, like in the 70s, in Denver, and that was her name. And then some fans of mine in Canada who met at one of my concerts, and then as a consequence of that, apparently, you know, fell in love, got married, had a baby. It was a girl, and they named her Geneva, which is like such a
Wow.
huge, it's very beautiful kind of thing, you know, for me to hear that. So, yeah, that's the shorter version of it.
Well, that's pretty special.
I feel like it is. I feel like it's like what? Hang on, like eh,
Yeah, yeah.
pinch me.
It's very meaningful.
Yeah.
So I find you interesting because I don't think you grew up wanting to be a singer. Singing came to you later on, and I don't know if you always sang but never realized that that's what you wanted to pursue, or if you just stumbled onto it later on. Tell me about your relationship with music as you were growing up.
It began with, I would say, my dad, my father, who had a beautiful voice, sang, around the home, sang along to his records. Also, actually, I find this quite humorous. He was a harmonica player,
Huh.
but we didn't see him that way, you know. And occasionally, when you're a kid and you're snooping around in your parents' bedroom, as we did, you know,
Yes.
why is he so precious about that top drawer of his dresser and opening the top drawer of the dresser, and lo and behold, there was a collection, a series of harmonicas, different ones, in old socks. He would keep them in socks. Well, obviously to keep them dry, I understand that now, and to keep the moisture off the reeds and da 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 da. But and then he had like two chromatics in there. I mean, he could play quite beautifully and sang quite beautifully. So I think that was, primo. I think that was number one influence, and his record collection, which was a lot of early country material and some blues, and then of course the he didn't seem to have this probably be the first time I'll say this. My father was from the deep south. That explains a lot. And he was very structured. He was a son of a preacher, 9 kids in the family, absolute dust bowl, grapes of wrath situation going on there, and during the Depression. And so he was quite structured in his thinking, and quite a disciplinarian. Not in a great way, not in a good way, honestly. But and people are complicated. People
Mm.
are complicated. There's struggle and there is beauty. There is ugliness and there is profound beautiful things, and he had all of that going. So, but I loved my father so much, and some of the best childhood memories were of him singing, uh, uh, singing to me, singing to us, singing along with the records, the Hank Williams, the Bull Moose Jackson records. You'd be familiar with who Bull Moose Jackson was, even if the listeners aren't. He had a big hit record called My Big 10 Inch, which of course is classic blues double entendre stuff. And 10 inches is the size of a 78, as we know
Right.
that now. But there was a huge hit for Bull Moose Jackson. Patsy Cline, Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. I mean, the early stuff that was really highly influential American roots music, which was some sort of, especially the Hank Williams and the Patsy stuff, sort of crossed up into, uh, you know, country and blues. If you've read anything about Hank Williams, you know, you will read about, if you scratch around, the profound influence that the blues had on him, and how he would buy a blues song from a blues musician for a cup of coffee and a meal in a diner, in a cafe, and the musician would be really thrilled to be fed and give him the song in exchange. You know, so uh, my father would have been the first, and I think a profound influence for me in that way.
Did you sing back then? Like, did you know your singing voice back
Not at
when you
all.
were growing up?
Not at all. Not in that way. I mean, I would sing along with the records because he sang along with the records, and I wanted to. And I never struggled with memorization of what was being sung, the words, the language, the story, because songs are stories, aren't they? They're snapshots, aren't they? They're it's like a snapshot of a moment in time, and I never struggled with that. I always understood, and then later listening to the radio, of course, it would be the British invasion, which was heavily influenced by blues. It would be the Beatles, later the Stones. I was more of a Beatles head than I was a Stones head. I'm talking being a little girl here, though. I'm a little
Right.
girl, and singing along with all that stuff. And I love to go to the store with my oldest brother because he would get in the car and immediately turn the radio on really loud, and then like turn on the stations that were playing James Brown, and turn on the stations that were playing, fundamentally black American music and early rock and roll. And we would drive. I would just be happy I don't care where we were going, didn't matter, just being in the front seat with my big brother and that radio cranking and singing along to it. So, I didn't find my voice, as you framed the question, which is a great way to frame it, really until I was in my mid 20s. I didn't begin to find it until I was in my mid 20s.
Which is pretty amazing. And I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, you had a very tragic life that you lost your parents early. You wound up in foster care
Right,
homes,
right.
many of them. During that period, when you were going through the rough times, what did music mean to you?
Everything. It was everything to me as a young girl in that struggle. I didn't have language for what I was experiencing in my life. I didn't have a lot of language to describe anything, really. But the music, and I got exposed to some very heavy blues outside of whatever radio stuff I would have come across or my father's record collection. I got exposed to some very heavy blues very young, very young. 14, I saw Otis Rush. 14, I saw B.B. King. I was in foster care by then. And as it goes with at-risk youth, it's not uncommon to have multiple placements. I had 12 placements in 2.5 years. Honestly, that's like, as it goes, it's not all that much. I mean, trust me, it's enough change. I changed high schools, basically 12 times. And, you know, that was hard. But the music was a place of connection for me. And that was the trip, man. If I, if I can frame it that way, that was everything. That made it tethered me. And outside of that, I was untethered. I was already, you know, as it is so profoundly. I mean, the first time I heard the song Motherless Child, I still can't with that song. It's very emotional for me. There is a connection, a deep connection that happens, and it still happens for me today. I mean, and I can quote 1,000 songs. Nobody loves me but my mother, and she could be jiving too. I mean, what do you do? Freddie King, what are you going to do when the welfare turns its back on you? Unless you get it, you don't get it.
Right. But you see Otis Rush at the age of 14.
Yeah.
It kind of changes your life, but not in a way that you're going to go out there and start singing the blues. But how does it change your life?
I felt, and I didn't have reminding the listeners, I didn't have language for it at the time. I didn't know what was going on. I did not understand the experience. I was drawn to it so deep. I was listening to Otis Rush in the back of a nasty club that I had no business being in, except I had a good fake ID, and people just weren't uptight about it back then, And I was completely taken hostage. It was an instantaneous obsession, and I was mortified. All of that happened at the same time. It was very terrifying for me to feel. It was as if my heart cracked open, and it was like I was being pulled, physically, viscerally pulled forward to the music. And I loved it so much I could just do that nonstop. I wanted to say I could drink it. And I started sobbing because I hadn't felt that before. And what I understand today, so here's the language. It connected me. It came out of Otis Rush's voice and the guitar and the sound of the band, and it came all the way across that club, and it just ripped my heart out of my chest. Took me hostage, 100%. Not in a bad way, but as a young, very disconnected young girl, woman child at 14, and had lost both my parents already, and I mean, there'd been a series of tragedies that had occurred. The last thing I wanted was my heart open. That was not on my list anywhere. That was not it.
But you don't, once again, going back to the idea of discovering your voice, that doesn't happen immediately. In fact, you make a choice to, if I'm not mistaken, become a sound engineer. That's how you were going to pursue music.
Right. I thought I couldn't sing.
Because you never did? Because.
I a combination of several things. I had no belief in myself. Zero. Zip. Nada. None. I was terrified of the sound of my voice, and yet I would very privately sing and sing and sing and sing and sing. I mean, again, ad nauseum. Certainly more than one foster parent would be like, okay, you have to stop now. They come into the room, they'd be like, you turn that down right now. You have to stop. It's too much. Because I would, so, okay, now I got the language for it. I was woodshedding. That's what we call woodshedding as musicians. I was studying. I was learning. But at the time, all I knew was that I had to do that. I had to do that. Compulsory is a very, very, it's much more of an obsession. And so finding my voice later, getting the job as the engineer, I didn't think I could sing. I also had made a series of really bad choices early in my life, and those I continued to do that. I would choose bad characters. I would choose people to be around and to be with that were not good human beings. There was a lot of physical violence. There were beatings. There were and the thing is, again, I have the language now. We go to the devil we know. We go to what's familiar, and that was familiar to me, and therefore, it's what I went towards. It's what I would seek out. Bad characters doing bad things.
So I wonder, there's two people, if I'm not mistaken, there are two people in your life back then that played a major role in who you became. One would be one of your foster parents. Your 13th, I guess, or maybe your 12th. Yeah. Who gave you confidence, I guess, who believed in you more than you believed in yourself. And then the other person, if I'm not mistaken, is Bob Tate, who worked at the studio?
No, Tate didn't work at the studio.
Oh, okay.
But I can...
But through your work at the studio, you met him?
No, I didn't meet Tate until I moved to Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
So the studio was in St. Paul, Minneapolis-St. Paul area, Minnesota. And I was convinced that I couldn't sing. Some of those bad characters had reinforced that. Stop singing. What are you doing? You sound horrible. Here's a quote. You sound like a cat in heat. Just cut it out. Who the fuck, who do you think you are? And I swallowed that. I swallowed that from them at that time. So, 1978, by the time 1978 rolled around, I just continued to believe that. I couldn't sing. I had a horrible voice. Horrible. Just stop. But I knew in 78, I had the realization that I needed to be with the music. And it was going to be tragic if I wasn't. So I was very deeply depressed about that decision, that idea, and what is now, I understand, as classic Janiva Magness. I sat with that for a while, a few months, and then something reared up in me and went, no, you ain't. You're not. If you can't do that, okay, just you can't sing. Fine. You're going to do the next best thing. You're going to become a recording engineer because then you can be around musicians and around the music and da-da-da-da-da. Well, there are no female recording engineers. I don't care about that. That means nothing to me. Is that your best argument? Well, we don't know if you, I don't care about that either. I'm doing this. And so I got a scholarship to go to electronics school. And then I just started walking into recording studios in St. Paul and Minneapolis saying, hey, I'd like to intern here. And they were like, well, what's your experience? And I'm like, none. And I got a gig, and it was like, no, 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 no. Bing, yes. But you're going to have to answer the phones. I'm like, no problem, no problem. Whatever you need. Scrub the toilet? Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to. Scrub the toilet all day long, whatever you need. Just let me be in it here. And that was a place called Sullivan Sound Recording. 1979, I worked there and as an intern. And then it was either it was a late night session. I was at the front desk. I was asleep with my head on the desk. They're back there and they're back there recording. It's really late. I'm tired, asleep, and they buzz me. Engineer Pete Martinson buzzes me and says, "Hey, we need your help." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you need?" And they're like, I'm thinking they got to set up a mic or go get some food or something. And they go, "We need some background vocals on this thing." And I'm like, "Oh, no, no, man." And he's like, "You used to sing, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, not really. No, that's no, no, no." And he's like, "I know you used to sing. You want to keep your job?" And I went, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Then get back here. I need some background vocals. So if you don't come back here, you're going to get fired. You're going to be fired." And that was how what I refer to now as the music came and got me.
What did that feel like? That moment when you actually stood behind the microphone singing your background vocals. What was that like for you?
Terrifying and life-giving. It was both those things in the moment. There's an energy exchange. There's all this science now about, what sound does for us, what sound does with us, how it changes the body chemistry, it changes the brain chemistry. There's all this stuff. So all the science about that we understand today. But in that moment, at that time in 1979, I was mortified, and yet it was an opening. And it was extremely powerful. I was shaking, physically shaking. And I did the background vocals. And then that artist, whose name was Herman Jones, who's like a old school R&B guy, soul guy, the next day called me up, called the studio and said, I need her phone number, called me up and said, "Hey, I listened to the stuff that you did and it really sounds great." And I said, "Thanks." I'm still like shaking in my boots, terrified from what I was forced to do. And he goes, "I got some other songs. I want you to sing them." And I was like, "Oh, no, man." And he's like, No, 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 no. But you don't really have a background. You're not a background singer. You're a lead singer." And I was like, "Oh, no, no." I mean, I was like backpedaling like Sylvester the Cat, hard. And he was like, No, no, no. I got these songs. I want you to sing lead on them. I ended up doing that. I was very scared, very frightened once again. But it felt, as terrifying as it was glorious. What a glorious feeling to make the sound, to sing the songs, to feel the resonance of the music. So yeah, and I don't want to skip over it because the foster mother, her name, placement number 12 was Carrie. And yes, she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. I thought I was alone in the house, and I was secretly singing along with a record. She walks in, and I was like, "Ah!" I was mortified, and I like ran over to the record player and turned it off really fast, and she goes, "Well, dear, you really have a lovely voice." And I was like, oh, thanks. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, and she was like, no, no, no. You can keep doing that, which had never been said to me. And I was like, what? She goes, you really. And she had a background in theater as well. And she really encouraged her kids to be creative and be in community theater. And they were always auditioning for this and that and doing this different stuff and dancing and singing. It was a very, that energy was so beautiful, very creative and very freeing. And I was not, other than seeing some live music as I was, wanted to do as much as I could as a young girl, I hadn't been exposed to that kind of a green light before. She said, you need to do something with that voice. And I was like, oh no, blah, 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 blah. I erased it as quickly as I could from my psyche, but it wouldn't go away.
So you get a few other opportunities to sing background
Yeah.
vocals. At what point do you get confidence? At what point do you think I can sing?
There are, this is going to sound like I'm joking, but I'd say, late 30s, early 40s. I'm not kidding. I was already making records, mind you. In other words, I had to do it. I had to do it. And what was going on internally was more of I'm getting away with this, as opposed to the ability to actually own it. There were, speaking in therapeutic terms, two selves. There were two selves. And one was very cut and carried a lot of brokenness. And the other one was the one that, like I described earlier, that just, stood up and went, no, you're not going to do that. If you can't do that, you're going to do the next best thing. You're going to become a recording engineer. And I don't care. There's no women. I don't care about any of that. I have to do this. And following that lead. So there were always two selves for me in that regard. And so really getting that I could sing and that it didn't sound half bad, which was how I had to come at it, didn't really hit until I was mid 30s or early 40s. And I was already singing and already working as a musician. But I felt like there was going to be a guy show up any minute with a uniform and a badge and a megaphone and yell at me that I was a fake and step away from the microphone. This is a huge mistake. You have to step away. That guy.
Tell me about the passion of being a musician. Did you have that? I mean, I can't imagine having the doubt or the split personality, but having doubt and lack of confidence in a world it's difficult to be in a band, to play music, to make a living doing that.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right. So even though you might have felt a bit of the imposter syndrome, there's something that kept you going. And was that just the passion for the music? What kept you going?
It was that. It was the passion for the music. It was how I would feel when I sing. And that hasn't stopped, by the way. I have not I want to say almost always, because maybe I forgot a time or something like that. I've almost always had that experience, that connection, that it is life-giving for me. It is an energy that to this day I desperately need to feel that connection. Again, didn't have language then, got a ton of language now. Human connection. Like I have said a lot, I finally understand what my job is. Like, I was a kid coming through what in foster care we used to refer to it as the meat grinder. Because there's just so much to say about the displacement and the disenfranchising of the vulnerable. And so I was deeply ensconced in that system. And but the music would like override all of that. The listening, the taking it in, the experience of singing and putting it out, working with musicians. I know what my job is, and my job, it turns out, is connection. And the vehicle for that is the music. I have other vehicles for it now as well, but at that time, it was all 100% the music. The vehicle was the music, and I desperately needed that connection. And it turns out that I still do. When I have gone through periods of time in my life where I haven't been singing, it doesn't take too long before I'm feeling kind of weird. And, I can walk from one room to the next room. And it happened a couple months into the pandemic for me. Like a lot of us, walking from my office into my kitchen and kind of not knowing what was going on. And I was like wringing my hands going, I don't know what's happening. And I don't know, losing that sense of purpose is brutal. So, and that happens to me when I have pockets, windows of time where I'm not actively in the music. And I'd like to be able to say, I've never lost my sense of purpose once I understood it, but that's just not true. Not accurate.
How did you go? You seem to have some, I don't know if luck is the right word, but you had some great experiences backing up other people, being a backup singer and doing some studio work, touring with Jimmy Buffett. At what point do you decide, I'm not going to be a backup singer anymore, I'm going to be the lead singer? How does that happen? How does that become a thing?
Almost all of the work I've done is lead singing. So I went from that session, that Herman Jones, the songwriter, R&B guy, soul guy.
Right.
He was widely respected in the Twin Cities area and a great artist. That weighed on me heavily. I just gravitated towards that, or I tend to think it came to get me. It came for me. I would be asked to do that. I would be asked to sing lead more than I would be asked to sing backgrounds on stuff. And the phrase was, well, really, you have a lead voice. You don't really have like a background voice, because background voices are largely about blending. And it's not that I can't blend, I certainly can. But my natural thing is the lead voice. So I became very practiced at that. I started singing lead in the 70s in, ridiculous, bands that played at a bowling alley. Not that that's ridiculous, that's fine. Any gig is a great gig. But I did have this job. This first official gig I got was with a big band. And there were 3 female singers and an Elvis impersonator. For real. And we worked at the Burnsville Bowl. We did that gig for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, the guy who was the lead, whose band it was, John Stafford, the drummer, of course. And he had a real thing about Buddy Rich. He was one of those and Buddy Rich is classically not known as not a nice guy. It's
right.
Musicians have T-shirts that say "I survived Buddy Rich" that have actually been in his bands and stuff like that. So at the end of 6 months, he didn't pay anybody. 6 months worth of shows, he didn't pay anybody. He just pocketed the money, and everybody was like, "We're out, we quit." And so, but that was great learning for me. Singing harmonies, singing leads, and we did everything from the current material, and I'm talking about Play That Funky Music, White Boy, if you listen to the song, to Andrew Sisters material, which is heavy harmony stuff, to yeah, the magnificence of the background vocals for the Elvis impersonator, you know. So my first, and then I did like this sort of like horrible rock band thing, and that didn't last terribly long. I just wasn't that into it. And then in Phoenix, I got a gig. I got tricked into a gig singing lead with a blues band by a girlfriend of mine who was the lead singer, and she wanted out of the gig, but she didn't want to leave him in a lurch. So she tricked me into like, hey, just I got a rehearsal and then we'll go have lunch. Cool. Meet me at the rehearsal. Okay, cool. And then she announced after I'd been there for 5 minutes that she said, "Oh, she's a great singer, but I gotta quit. I can't do this gig anymore. But you should hire her." And she walked out, and I was standing there with like four guys I didn't know, and it was like, well, and they all looked at each other and they went, "Okay, what do you got?" And I was like, "Oh no, guys, no, 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 no." And they were like, "Yeah, just sing something." And that's how that happened in Phoenix. And then I started doing duo stuff. I met a guitar player, because you meet a guitar player, don't you? And he was really cute, and could really play. And I started doing duo gigs with him. And we started doing a bunch of country blues, Memphis Minnie's, Kansas Joe McCoy, Son House stuff, Robert Johnson stuff. It just was, and he was deeply in that, and so I got deeply in that in terms of where my beginning backgrounds of actually studying the deep blues, the deep traditional acoustic blues, Skip James, like it was deep, you know.
Do you know at this point what you want to do?
I just
I mean,
I just want to sing.
Is this just?
I just want to sing. I'm working at a 24-hour Nautilus at the front desk, because I was one of those like pretty cute young things at the front desk of the gym. So those back in those days in the early 80s were like staffed with just like, you had to be really cute to work at the front desk and greet people and sell memberships and sign them up and crap like that. And so I was working at the front desk of a 24-hour Nautilus, and then that guy who became a millionaire decided he really liked me, and he wanted me to be his PA, as in personal assistant. So I started working for him, and I was working for him full 6 days a week. There was no room for music. I didn't have even in my 20s at that point, there was no room for music. And I did that gig for a year. And I had, the house I lived in, he owned, and the car that I drove, which was a metallic gold BMW, nice car, 320i, I think it was. Really sweet little car, was his car. And I was going to kill myself at the end of a year, and I knew it. And it was because I couldn't get to the music. I couldn't make it. So I quit the job, took a serious pay cut, got a job working at the front desk of a small construction company, so that I knew that at least on the weekends I could jam or something. And that turned into the room to have gigs. I can't be without it.
And is there a thought in your head as to what you want to achieve? What was it, an end goal, or was it just gigging?
Nah, just the music. Just be with the music. There was no like, okay, here's my game plan. I hadn't been a person who was oriented towards achieving goals. I've learned
So
that.
when did that happen?
That quite a bit later in life.
Do you know how that happened?
That's a interesting question for me, because I haven't really thought about how that happened, other than my father, who again I said was a complicated man, was a great salesman. He could sell skin to a snake for the top price. He was really good at that. You know, not great at keeping his family together, but really good at selling people stuff. And there was and it's known in it was known in the family. We just used to call it the Bill Magness. That's the Bill Magness. And I had that. That would begin to manifest in today's language in my 20s while I was living in Phoenix and singing in a band. And this is I got a gig. I wanted to sing with this band called the Blues Connection, and they were a great band. Enter Bob Tate. Bob Tate was in the Blues Connection. He had been in a band called the Detroit Blues Band back in this blues singer by the name of Big Pete Pearson, Phoenix area guy. And one night Pete got really mad and fired the whole band. And all they did was just like lock and roll. And they were like, okay, fine. We don't need Pete. We'll just get some other singers. And and Bob Corritor was in that band, this is where I met,
really?
The period of time when I met Corritor. And they had this regular jam on some weeknight. I don't know if it was Sunday, Monday. I don't remember what night of the week it was, but I would show up at this jam and sing. And every time I would sing, the crowd would go bananas. And this was drums, bass, guitar, harmonica, and two horns. Bob Tate and Emerson Carruthers. And Bob Tate, of course, was the musical director for Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson and all he had like, I didn't know any of that. And Emerson was the other horn player that did that side by side with Bob. And so I just loved going to these jams and singing, and I knew they were looking for a singer, and I thought secretly, I couldn't say it out loud. I had to like hold it really tight, but secretly maybe I could, maybe they'd ask me. And so I'd showed up several times for this jam. Crowd was going nuts. Corritor didn't want me on the gig. I don't know why. It didn't matter to me. I didn't care. And Elmer Scott, the drummer, who's another, like, this is like historically, you find out later who these cats are, and it's like, what? Elmer Scott played with Dyke and the Blazers and a bunch of other people. Dyke and the Blazers because their first hit record was Funky Broadway before Otis Redding got his hands on it. Oh, anyway, Elmer Scott and Tate and Emerson all looked at Bob and they went, hire the girl. What is wrong with you, man? We're going to work a lot. And he was like, nah, she didn't have it. And they were like, you're full of it, man. Hire the girl. And so he comes to me and he's like, well, they want me to hire you to be one of the singers, but I don't know. I just don't think you have it. And here comes Bill Magness, the spirit of Bill Magness. Well, what do you mean by that, Bob? Well, how many blues songs do you actually know? And I said, you want me to make you a list? He goes, yeah, make me a list. I go, all right, I'll see you next week. I'll bring a list. And so I show up the next week and I've got 2.5 or 3 pages on a legal pad size of paper, one song every line and the key. Because you got to know your keys. And he looks at it and he goes, wow. And I said, what do you want to play? And that got me the job. And that's the spirit of Bill Magness. Later on, and Bob did all the booking and all that kind of stuff. And then there would be what I would consider a breach later on. First in a series of many breaches for a woman in the music business. So, lessons none of us want to learn. And Bob would book a gig. He would book a gig for the band without me backing up Otis Rush. and it was 2 nights. And he went around and talked to everybody in the band first, and then came back and told me what they were going to do. And now, if he'd come to me and said, look, we want to do this, they don't have the budget, they don't want us to bring a singer, but we really want to do this, I would have gone, yeah, just like leave my name at the door. Are you kidding me? That would have been, because that's who I am. But that's not how he chose at that time to handle the business. It was a poor business practice as far as I was concerned. And so when that happened, I considered that an irrevocable breach. And I said, okay, fine, if this is how it's going to be. So I went out and I booked like 3 months worth of shows because Bill Magness was in the house, really. And, I booked 3 months worth of shows, and then I went back and I said, okay, I got a bunch of work. And Bob was like, oh, that's great. And I said, yeah. So everybody in the band wants to do it. Do you want to be on the gig? And he was like, well, of course. And I said, okay, it's going to be called Janiva Magness. And he goes, nah, it's not how it works. And I said, it's how these gigs work. It's okay if you don't want the gig, man. We're good. We don't have to have harmonica. So literally gave him, basically gave him a dose of that medicine. And again, that's like the spirit of Bill Magness. And in those moments, that has reared as it's turned out to be an incredible amount of strength. Long story, sorry.
No, but I'm fascinated by the fact that with your background, and you talk about yourself as being a very much a loner while you're growing up, and justifiably so with what you've gone through, and not having the language or not having the confidence. But at some point or another, you're known as somebody who's very confident. Right?
Isn't that funny? I think it's hilarious. Okay.
But I don't know how that, and also knowing what you went through, which was difficult, like, to say the least, to be beaten down like that, to have 12 foster care homes, and to lose your parents and everything else that you've gone through. And just to, at one point, find that inner confidence is a pretty amazing thing.
It's, for me, a series of miracles. I'm not making a joke about that. May I just say it out loud? May I just tell the listeners? Because I don't know what you're going to do with the podcast preemptively or the roll up or whatever, but I'll just say it. So, yeah, people are complicated. And yes, I went through 12 foster homes in 2.5 years. The reason I ended up in foster care is because my parents died when I was a kid. I understand today, now I have the language. They died from untreated alcoholism. But what that looked like was suicide. So my mother killed herself first. My father killed himself subsequent to that, 2 years later. My nephew drowned 5 months. My 15-month-old nephew drowned in the pool in the backyard 5 months after my mother's death at the same house. No one talked about anything. I was, a young child who was sexually abused at home, and that was also hidden very well. I wish that was some sort of news flash, but we know so much more today. So when you examine that kind of a incredibly beautiful from the outside household family, and then behind closed doors, the kind of stuff that's going on, and the violence and the sexual assault and the denial, the deep denial, the profound abuse. And so the foster care thing was difficult, But it was better. It was better for me to be away from the family. I'm the only of five, only child of five who ended up in foster care. Nobody else did. And so, was that hard? Was that difficult? You bet. That's what, for the listener's ear, that's what Mako is referring to. But what is incredibly beautiful, and when I begin to speak about miracles, I ain't kidding, you know, is that part of my life no longer defines me. I don't live, I refer to it as the cut, okay? It's the cut. It's not death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's a lot deeper than that. Deep wounds. I don't live in the cut anymore. Am I still affected by it? Of course. You know, holidays, I get a little weird. You know, I have a long history of clinical depression. It's not pretty. You know, psychiatric hospitalizations, 3 in between those 12 foster homes pinging around. 12 different high schools. I mean, you know, that was a lot. And yet and still I can speak, I think, quite freely about it. And the reason for that isn't, woe is me. The reason for that is because it doesn't define me any longer. Like, there is a saying that is possible for our greatest tragedy to become our greatest asset. And I feel quite strongly that is part of the case for me, because I also am a advocate for at-risk youth. And they look at me now and they're like, what the hell does she know? And then I share something and then they go, oh, she does know. And if she can do it, the end of the story goes, if she can do it, maybe I can do it. And that, my friend, is gold. That's gold.
What did writing the book do for you?
Wow. It's hard to articulate all of it because it did a lot. I spent most of my life up to that point not telling anybody anything because it's none of your business. And I had friends that had no idea I even had siblings because I had friends at one point that thought I was an only child because I never talked about family, you know, other than the fact that my folks were dead. I didn't say why, I didn't say how, I didn't say anything because it's none of your business. And so when I came to understand in my late 30s that I might be able to help someone, I'd really known there was like this voice that whispered to me, not a psychotic voice, but like a voice that would whisper, this sort of little knowing voice that would say, you know, you really need to, you need to write a book, honey. And I'd be like, yeah, no, not going to happen. When I finally realized that, in fact, I did need to write the book, it took me 6 years. And it was a very heavy process. I was touring like a monster during that 6-year period of time, which turns out to be a blessing because I would work on the book, right. And then I'd be like, I have to stop. Touring. Okay, home. Work on the book some more and then, gotta stop. And so I did it in fits and starts. And the first thing I think of is that it gave me compassion for that little girl. Up to that point, I didn't really have much of that for her. It gave me I want to try and be brief about this statement. Post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder is often referred to now, which, is a label that I carry, CPTSD. I get the letters mixed up, because everything's an acronym now. But one of the beautiful ways that the brain will function when it comes to trauma is that it'll fragment the experience. Y'all out there listening, go ahead and Google what I'm saying after the fact if you don't believe it, or I don't explain it well enough. It fragments the experience in the person's mind who is experiencing the trauma in order to survive it. And it's you could, I sort of think of it as like little pockets or little windows or little files in my head splattered all over the place. There's nothing linear that's being stored in the memory. It's this pocket over here to the high right and that over there to the far left, and there's one over here, and blah, 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 but it's fragmented. So it's not linear, because in order to survive the experience, it needs to be broken up into a bunch of little disconnected pieces. And the book made that all of those experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything over a 6-year period of time got linear. And I remember as we were approaching the end of writing the book to go to publishing, sort of pushing back from my laptop and thinking, Jesus Christ, no wonder they thought I was crazy. I, was told I was schizophrenic. I'm not. Here was the label: schizophrenic, maladjusted, manic depressive, and highly suicidal. And it's because I acted like I was bongo, man. Boing, 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 all over the place. And approaching the end of the book, and as I was writing it, it was like, oh my God, no wonder. That poor kid. That poor young woman. And what a gift that has been. It wasn't a goal. Self-compassion was not. I've never been someone who thinks that I am all that in a bag of chips. I've just never thought that about myself. Other people have thought that, and that's lovely and sometimes embarrassing. But finding that compassion and then understanding that the clarity with that is more of an asset to help others has been really rich.
I wonder how much your music, and I'm not sure if success is the right word, or just the fact that you were doing your music, and I won't say success, the level of success, the feedback you've gotten from your audience, and the fact that, you're touring all over the world. I wonder how much that plays into having the confidence to write a book. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I also find it interesting that when you first started, you didn't really, I think you wrote some songs in the very beginning, but for a long period of time, you covered other people's material. Right. You also had the ability to somehow make it your own.
Thank you.
But at one point or another, you made a conscious decision to write more and do your own stuff.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how that came about and if that was an easy transition. But, writing songs is not easy.
No.
And to become a decent writer is even harder. So how did that come along?
I never wanted to be a songwriter. I was married to a prolific songwriter, an incredibly talented man, a beautiful multi-instrumentalist, One of them guys that you like, he holds the instrument for 15 minutes and he's playing it, and you're just like, what? Something's wrong with you, man. Like, how do you do that? And that was like a joke, let's kill him, because it just doesn't, and I was married to this man for 17 years. And I just didn't want to be a song. I didn't want to write. And I had people telling me for years, you need to write songs. Bruce Ziegler, you need to write your own songs. My producer, well, is it time to write your own songs? No, I don't want to do it. I didn't want to be that vulnerable. And I was very clear that what if I sucked? What if I was horrible at it? I tried and I was horrible. I just couldn't. I couldn't weather that. But what was worse was what if I wasn't terrible? What if I was actually good at writing songs? And then there might be, another thing on the table causing me problems in my marriage. I wasn't going to go there. And I didn't want the responsibility because I think that talent, we don't talk about this. Maybe because nobody wants to talk about it. I don't know. I don't care. When we discover that we have talent or a gift or however you want to frame it, we have a responsibility. That's how I see it. I have a responsibility to nurture that, to pull it through, to manifest it. You don't hide it. Can I curse here, Mako? It's bullshit. It's bullshit if you hide it. What are you doing? I literally think it is, and I suppose there's a God there's some sort of force in the universe, It's like putting your ass in God's face. It's not a good idea. You know what I mean? That's how I see it. So I didn't even want to I didn't want to stick my toe in the water. Problems might cause more problems in the marriage. I love this man deeply. I was never going to leave. And then, not just like, what if I sucked? That would be I don't know if I could live with that, but what if I didn't suck? And then I would have even more responsibility to do more. I didn't want to do it. I was pissed. Just shut up with the songwriter. Okay.
What changed?
He left me. Divorce. And at the time, I was never going to leave that relationship. I was never going to leave that marriage. At the time, I didn't see it. I had friends, and I was touring like a beast. It was 2010, late 2010 or early 2011. And I had friends, other artist friends, highly respected, well accomplished. Gary Nicholson says to me, I'm on tour, we're in Nashville, and Gary Nicholson and Colin Linden are opening a show for me. It should have been the other way around as far as I was concerned, but those guys were like, no, we're going to do a duo and open for you. And I was like, Jesus H, okay. And I'm on tour and I'm falling apart. Not on the stage, but everywhere else. The guys in the band were like, is she going to make it? Because I'd be in the back of the bus crying while we were traveling. And every day it was really hard. Get off the stage after the show. Gary and Colin are there, and we're talking, and I walk up and I go, I just blurted it out. My husband left. And Gary Nicholson looks at me and he goes, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry. And now I'm crying, standing there crying, talking to Gary and Colin. And then Nicholson just looks at me and he goes, but you know what? And I go, what, man? And he goes, you're going to get some great songs out of this. And I was like, ah! But he was right. And I had started to write at the behest of my producer, before that. But I was so reluctant. I was so frightened. I didn't want to do it. And then once that split happened, I was like, okay, fine. This is how it's going to be? Fine. And then I started being more willing to write. So that's how that happened, you know.
So how easy was that?
It was brutal for me. But what? There's Bill Magness again. I have to credit that strength of spirit to my father, and ultimately to my maternal grandfather, who was incredibly strong, stubborn Scottish guy. I mean, like, not a nice man, but strong. The preacher.
Do you remember the first song that you liked, that you wrote? Because I can imagine you probably wrote some that you didn't like. And like might not be the right word, but something that you wrote and thought, wow, this isn't bad.
Yeah, it's a really weird song, though. Nobody has heard it except for myself and my ex-husband. Before we were together, I wrote a lyric, because I'm more of a lyricist than anything. But I wrote a lyric, a very strange, odd little lyric, very Tom Waitsy song called Kick That Dog. And it's about depression. It's about staving off depression. Kick that dog at my door, which, believe me, I'm like, I've been a non-meat eater since I was 14 years old. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not kicking any dogs. God help you if you kick your dog in front of me, we're going to have a problem. But, but the name of the song was Kick That Dog. And then Jeff and I, my ex-husband and I, wrote a song called Good Car, which we recorded and put out on an album. The album is out of print. It's called It Takes One to Know One. And then, so I kind of thought, well, this is pretty cool. I didn't think Good Car was that good of a song, but Kick That Dog was a pretty powerful song. I mean, what's the lyric? I'm just going to say it out loud. You got to think about Tom Waits, okay? Kick that dog at my door. Loneliness is barking. Eating life's garbage in an alley. Broken dreams cut my soul. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it goes on from there. It's Tales from the Dark Side. So, but I think the most significant start, because there's a bunch of starts, aren't there? For me in the songwriting thing was I Won't Cry, which ended up getting Song of the Year at the BMAs and at the Blues Music Awards for the listeners, and it got Song of the Year for Blues Blast magazine. That's on an Alligator record. 2012, I think it was. I'm looking at the plaque that's on the wall behind me. At the recognition plaque, So I think it really hit there, and it freaked me out. It freaked me out because I was like surrendering to the idea that okay, all right, I'll just try it. Just if no other reason, just so you people will shut up. Stop bugging me about this. So, yeah.
How do you view songwriting now?
I want to tell you that something you may not know. I was inducted into the Women's Songwriters Hall of Fame this year.
I did know that.
Bruh, I got to tell you, I'm like, is this a mistake? Is the guy with the megaphone and the badge coming again? Because I think he is in the back room. He's just waiting for me to screw up so bad that he's going to come through the door and start shouting at me on the megaphone. And that was heavy for me because the other women that were being inducted this year, I'm talking like Janice Ian, what? Sylvia Moy, whether you don't know who Sylvia Moy was, uh, she was the only female writer at Motown. What did she write? Let's see. She wrote pretty much most of Stevie Wonder's hits. My Cherie Amour, like all those songs written by Sylvia Moy, another Detroit gal. I'm originally from Detroit. So
Right.
that was really, and a bunch of other women, and it like heavy hitters, and it really weighed on me. Like I had to like check my, you know, imposter anxiety at the door. And it was really, really beautiful. How is songwriting for me still to this day? It's painful. But I do it a lot more willingly. A lot more willingly. I was just talking to a young woman who's a beautiful, beautiful artist who I really admire yesterday on the phone, and we're going to try to collaborate on a song for her next record. So I'm excited and scared. It's painful, but I am much more willing.
I mean, do you think the painful thing will ever go
No,
away? I mean, is that not part of the
I think it
process?
is. For me. For me. There are people that I know, and my ex-husband being one of them, it's just like, meh, done. Got a new song. That is not my experience. So, you know, but I do think it is painful for some of us. Yeah, you know.
Do you have goals at this point? I mean, you've accomplished a lot, and I don't even know if you've felt like you've actually achieved goals, because it didn't sound like you set out with goals in mind. But
I didn't.
do you have goals at this point?
Um, Regarding music, I know that I need to keep doing it. I know that sounds like a soft goal, but it's not. It's not an easy thing, man. And in
No.
this world, and there are fewer and fewer gigs. And in terms of the base, let's talk in marketing language, the base demographic is shrinking. The venues are fewer and fewer. There are, in management terms, there are fewer blues dollars than there have been in a maybe ever. So everybody's bucking for that gig, that slot at the festival, that you know, a gig at the theater, the blah 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 blah, and so it's hard. But honestly, hard has never really frightened me all that much. Obviously, if you look at the trajectory of my life, I'm like, hard. What else you got? Got anything else? Because uh, you want to scare me? Let's talk about intimacy. You want to really scare me? You want to really scare me? Give me some recognition. Oh, for God's sakes! You want to really terrify me? Give me an award. Yeah, that'll freak her out, and it does. But I want to continue to do the music. I do have a record. I don't have a street date on it, but it is coming out in 2026. It's live. That's exciting. Recorded it live in Santa Monica in front of an audience of about 150 people at a sound stage in Santa Monica with a very, very cool, very talented fellow by the name of Bob Clearmountain.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Yeah, I just recorded with Clearmountain, so I was like, wait, what? And so that's exciting. I have tour dates coming up for Europe.
Nice.
Yeah, for Europe in the latter part of the year, starting, July, August, November, some stuff. So I'm trying to connect the dots there, put that together. I'm very excited about that. Those goals there, yeah. I'd like to write some more.
Like
You know,
fiction?
I'd Oh no, not a
Oh,
book. Dear God, no. Oh my God. Oh, I can't do that again.
maybe songs.
Uh, yeah, I mean songs. I'd like to write some more songs. So I think that that's a good place to reach for, the goals other than like, yeah, you really got to clean that closet out because it's scary. You open the door and it's terrifying. It's like Halloween in there. Don't go
I
in
got one
there.
of those.
Yeah. The warehouse, which is just over here, you don't get to see that. My warehouse area really needs to be reorganized. Those kind of goals. I have those. But in terms of music and career, you know, I feel profoundly grateful. I feel incredibly, I don't know what the word is here. I don't have the language for what this is, but that I have come as far as I have in my life and in my career. Bruh, let me tell you something. B.B. King called my name.
I was there.
I can't with that. I still can't with that. Not only did he call my name, he said it right. I think that, I don't know, and I had heard through other friends, through other very close friends of mine that were close friends of his, that he did really dig my work. And when he called my name for Entertainer of the Year, understand a couple things. The guy with the megaphone and the badge was still really following me around very closely, very closely. We're not going to let her get away with too much more. And the first time I saw B was the same year that I saw Otis Rush. So there's a 14-year-old woman child that was standing up there. I can see it. Those pictures, I see those pictures of me standing there with B.B. King, and I know exactly what I was thinking. And how I felt was like that 14-year-old little girl, woman child, just like, shocked in the best possible way. And so happy to be in his presence, yeah. Goals. I'd like to help other people. That is a goal. However I can, and it is the driving force. It is the singular driving force for me to be so open about my life, about my history. Because if that's not, if that wasn't the purpose of me having all that crap and then coming through it and coming out the other side, then what, if that wasn't the purpose to help other people, then what the hell was going on? Really? Why did that? You know what I mean? Like, there's no explanation I've been able to find, and I assure you I've looked. My first word as a little girl was not mama or dada. My first word, and my siblings, and they're all gone, by the way. Everyone's gone now. They're all dead. They all died from untreated addiction. It's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
They used to tease me unmercifully because my first word was why. I wanted to know. I was that little kid. Why? 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 I needed to understand. And I think that I do now. And that's worth a lot. So if the universe wants to hold me up as an example, I'm so less than perfect. But I'll do it if that's the job.
Janiva, thank you so much for doing this. Every time I talk to you, it's always a pleasure. And like you said, ask me anything. It's just a treat for me to share some time with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the support, and I really do. I really appreciate it, and I deeply appreciate the mindful questions.
No, thank you.
Thanks, man.